Once known as the most dangerous country on earth, El Salvador is now one of the safest in Latin America, and the whole world is trying to figure out how that happened. How did a small, war-torn nation buried in debt, fear, and gang control suddenly become a symbol of order and innovation? Some call it a miracle. Others call it manipulation. But either way, the transformation is impossible to ignore. This story breaks every rule of geopolitics, because while most leaders talk about change, Nayib Bukele forced it. From jailing tens of thousands to betting an entire economy on Bitcoin, he's turned El Salvador into a real-world experiment in power, security, and modern governance. But the question isn't whether it's working, it's how long it can last. Stay until the end, because this isn't just a story about El Salvador. It's about how far a leader can go to rebuild a broken nation, and whether that same formula could reshape Latin America itself. What you're about to discover might completely change the way you see politics, leadership, and the price of progress. Not so long ago, El Salvador was known as the world's murder capital, a place where walking down the wrong street could mean never coming home. The country was strangled by fear, its nights haunted by the echo of gunshots, and its people trapped between gangs and poverty. MS-13 and Barrio 18 weren't just criminal groups, they were shadow governments controlling entire neighborhoods. Tourists stayed away, businesses fled, and the world turned its back on this small Central American nation. But today, headlines tell a different story, one that almost feels unreal. El Salvador now reports one of the lowest crime rates in Latin America, a transformation so drastic that it's caught the attention of global media and curious economists. Imagine going from chaos to calm in just a few years. That's the narrative unfolding here. Cafes reopen, families stroll in once dangerous parks, and the word hope has returned to the Salvadoran vocabulary. Yet behind this miracle, a question lingers. How did it all happen so fast? The nation's turnaround isn't a simple success story. It's a mystery layered with bold politics, iron fist policies, and risky economic experiments. Every foreign analyst has a theory, but none can fully explain the speed of this change. Some call it a miracle of leadership, others warn it's just control wrapped in good PR. Whatever it is, El Salvador has the world watching, and everyone's asking the same thing. What did Nayib Bukele do to pull this off? To understand El Salvador's transformation, you've got to rewind to the ashes of its civil war in the 1980s, a brutal conflict that left more than 75,000 dead and an entire generation traumatized. When the peace accords were signed in 1992, peace was only on paper. The economy was shattered, institutions were weak, and thousands of young men who'd known nothing but war were left jobless. Then came a wave of deportations from the United States, sending gang members like those from MS-13 and Barrio 18 back to El Salvador, where they found fertile ground to grow their criminal empires. By the early 2000s, these gangs had turned El Salvador into a living nightmare. Extortion, murder, and fear became part of daily life. Neighborhoods were divided by invisible borders. Cross one, and you risked your life. People fled by the thousands, heading north to the U.S., chasing the dream of safety. Those who stayed lived under the constant shadow of violence. Corrupt politicians and police only deepened the crisis, creating a system where gangs thrived and justice rarely reached the poor. The government tried tough-on-crime plans for decades, but each one failed because the rot ran deeper than anyone wanted to admit. It wasn't just about guns or drugs, it was about survival, inequality, and lost hope. El Salvador's people were desperate for someone to break the cycle, to finally bring peace that could be felt, not just promised. And then, a man with a baseball cap, tweets, and unshakable confidence stepped into the spotlight. When Nayib Bukele burst into El Salvador's political scene, he didn't look or sound like the old guard. No gray suit, no polished speeches, just a millennial president who knew how to command attention on Twitter. At 37, he became the youngest leader in Latin America, branding himself as the antidote to corruption and inefficiency. His promise was bold: to end the chaos and rebuild El Salvador from the ground up. For a nation drowning in fear, his confidence felt like oxygen. Bukele's rise wasn't just about charisma. It was a rebellion against decades of political stagnation. For years, the same two parties, ARENA and the FMLN, had traded power while ordinary citizens saw no change. Bukele shattered that duopoly, positioning himself as the people's president. He walked among the poor, live-streamed cabinet meetings, and called out critics in real time. His strategy worked. Not only did he dominate local politics, but he also redefined how Latin American leaders could connect directly with their citizens. But behind his relatable image lay a polarizing figure. Some saw him as a visionary reformer, using technology to modernize governance. Others warned he was a populist consolidating too much power. Still, his approval ratings soared above 80%. El Salvador had finally found a leader willing to take risks, and as the world would soon see, Bukele's next move would rewrite the country's history in ways no one imagined. When Bukele declared a nationwide state of emergency in 2022, El Salvador's streets transformed overnight. The government unleashed a massive crackdown on El Salvadoran gangs, leading to over 70,000 arrests, the largest anti-gang operation in Latin America's modern history. Within months, homicide rates plummeted by more than 90%, according to government data. Parents who once feared sending their kids to school could finally exhale. It was a miracle for many, but a nightmare for those caught in the gray zone between justice and vengeance. Bukele's centerpiece of his war on crime was the Secot megaprison, a colossal fortress built to hold up to 40,000 inmates, many linked to MS-13 and Barrio 18. Images of tattooed prisoners lined up in chains went viral, becoming symbols of El Salvador's newfound security. Critics called it inhumane, a dystopian show of power. Supporters called it necessary, a price worth paying to reclaim the nation. For ordinary Salvadorans, the trade-off was simple. Safety had returned, even if democracy took a hit. Bukele's approval ratings soared past 90%, and Latin America watched in awe and fear. Some leaders praised his results, while others warned that El Salvador was flirting with authoritarianism. Still, Bukele's formula worked. Crime fell, tourism rose, and global attention followed. But as he tightened his grip on security, another bold experiment was already brewing, one that would move from prisons to the digital frontier. In 2021, Nayib Bukele made a move that stunned economists worldwide. He declared Bitcoin legal tender in El Salvador. It was the first country in the world to do so, turning a small Central American nation into a global crypto experiment. The idea was daring: to attract investment, boost tourism, and liberate El Salvador's economy from the US dollar's grip. He promised innovation, tech jobs, and a future powered by digital freedom. But as with every gamble, there was risk. The world reacted fast. Some called him a genius visionary, others a reckless gambler. Yet Bukele pressed on, launching Bitcoin Beach, a real coastal community where locals could buy coffee and pay for surf lessons with crypto. He even teased plans for a Bitcoin city powered by volcano energy, a blend of ambition and spectacle that captivated global audiences. So, did it work? The results are mixed. Crypto prices crashed in 2022, and many foreign investors stayed cautious. Still, the experiment drew digital nomads, entrepreneurs, and curious travelers eager to witness the crypto nation firsthand. Whether this is innovation or political theater depends on who you ask. But one thing is clear: Bukele has shifted El Salvador's story from fear to fascination. And now the world was watching to see what kind of country would emerge from his bold blueprint. Today, El Salvador stands at a crossroads between rebirth and reinvention. Once a synonym for violence, it's now marketing itself as the safest country in Latin America. Surf towns like El Zonte are booming with digital nomads, remote workers, and curious tourists chasing both waves and Wi-Fi.
Streets once controlled by gangs are now filled with cafes, co-working spaces, and young entrepreneurs. For the first time in decades, Salvadorans abroad are returning, not out of necessity, but out of pride. The economy, though still fragile, shows signs of momentum. Tourism revenue hit record highs, and Bitcoin ATMs now dot the coastline. Yet the transformation goes deeper than money. It's about identity. Under Bukele's rule, El Salvador has redefined what power and security look like in Latin America. His strongman image divides analysts, but for millions of citizens, it represents safety and progress. The question is whether this model can last, or if it's a temporary calm built on tight control. As the world debates, Bukele's influence stretches far beyond his borders. From Argentina to Mexico, leaders are studying
the El Salvador transformation like a political playbook. Can order and opportunity coexist under one man's vision? Or is this just the calm before the next storm? One thing's undeniable. El Salvador has forced the world to look again, not in pity, but in curiosity. And that, perhaps, is its greatest transformation yet. El Salvador's transformation isn't just a political case study, it's a mirror for the world. A place that went from chaos to control, from fear to pride, and from forgotten to global headline. But behind every success lies a question: how much freedom are people willing to trade for safety? Bukele's model proved that change is possible, but also that power, once concentrated, is rarely shared again. So now the world watches. Can El Salvador sustain this new identity, or will it crack under its own weight? Will other Latin American nations follow the same path, chasing order no matter the cost? The future of the region might depend on how this story ends, because if Bukele's experiment holds, it could redefine what security means for an entire continent. What do you think? Is El Salvador a miracle of modern leadership or a ticking time bomb waiting to explode? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you want to keep learning about the forces shaping our world, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's a lot more to uncover together.